Chapter 11:21 The Beasts from Below. Despite my protestations, the slug is surprisingly maneuverable, slithering towards me with those burning orbs fixated on my position. Judging by the mana sense I'm getting, this isn't some freshly spawned creature, but an actual monster from below who's climbed up for some easy pickings. Unfortunately, you aren't going to find any here. Only death. Your death, specifically. Yes, this creature absolutely has a core thrumming away within that slimy body, and I'm not especially sure how I'm going to get at it. I can only assume attempting to eat this thing is going to dissolve my body from the inside out. While I'm busy wondering about how I'm going to consume it, the slug is busy attempting to ensure that never happens. The tendrils on its back, dozens and dozens of them, all thicken at the same time, and only my future sense allows me to react in time as they suddenly shoot a wide spray of sizzling acid at me. Yikes. I scramble backwards up the tunnel as fast as I can as the acid rains down, almost clipping the tip of my antennae. The moment it touches the ground, the thick slime begins to burn into the rock, and then, even more scarily, it begins to spread so quickly I can see it happen. In mere moments, the area I'd been standing in has been converted to a thick coat of steaming goop over which the slug effortlessly glides. Not a fan. How the heck did it take no damage from the fire attack? I need to study the opponent further. Still assuming that fire is a weakness of these creatures, I spin up multiple mines that begin hurling concentrated balls of flame at the creature. The spells streak through the air, crackling with potent heat, only to sink into the slug and dissipate with a rather limp puff sound. What the heck? It's only then I realize that I'm not actually looking at the monster itself, but rather an incredibly thick and dense layer of sludge. The stuff is so dense it looks like flesh. I am not liking this at all. Again, with surprising speed, the slug slithers towards me, and the moment those tendrils start to thicken, I start hightailing it out of there, back up the tunnel and towards the nest. I don't even think it's aiming for me. By unleashing the acid spray, the monster continues to build a little highway for itself and create an area I can't really get to without risking my precious feats. The inexorable advance of the slug. Fine, if that's how you want it, try and resist this. Using more of my mines, I pull together the mana I need and compress it hard before unleashing another dragon's breath, superheating the tunnel in front of me and evaporating the acid in a second. Gway hey, you think you're fire resistant? Let's put it to the test. Obviously, I can't see a thing with a huge jet of fire blasting out in front of me, but I can still sense the monster, and now that I'm paying attention, I can tell it's still advancing, even into the teeth of the flame. What the heck is with this slug? My future sense screams at me and I roll to the side, cutting off the spell as I scramble. A slimy thing spears through my previous position, topped with a ring of needle-thin teeth. Having missed the target, the slug begins to reel the appendage back, the teeth flexing and gnashing as they slide past me along the ground. Despite the appearance to the contrary, I can definitely see that the slug has taken some damage from my fire. Whatever coating it's using to cover itself is clearly extremely fire resistant, but even though that's the case, a significant portion of the coating has been burned away at the front. However, before my eyes, the stuff is regenerating. That's just irritating. Fair play, slug. Fire is obviously an inefficient way to deal with you. I credit your evolution and mutation choices. You've overcome this weakness in spades. Now, how do you feel about black holes? www. Not nearly a full power version, nevertheless, the gravity bomb rips through the air toward the slug as I scrabble backwards to gain some distance. I didn't even bother infusing this one with the altar since it's too close to the nest, and to me, but I trust that it'll still get the job done. Too slow to dodge, the slug gets hit right in the face, trusting its dense coating will be enough to protect it from the fury of my spell. Not the case, as it turns out. When the gravity bomb expands and begins to pull in and shred everything it touches, the slug is no exception. Halfway through the spell's duration, the sweet experience notification rings out in my mind. You have defeated Occultus Toxicus Limax beat level 32. You have gained XP. When the spell fades and I release my tight grip on the stone, I immediately skitter towards the impact zone. What I find is a little surprising and disturbing. The slug wasn't fully consumed by the gravity bomb. I can see the real body of the creature now, barely a fifth of the monster's full, coated size. The eye stalks were real, but are far longer than I initially thought, extending through all that slime to the outside. Unsurprisingly, the real body is still sluggy, without arms or legs, but with a series of those strange, ring-toothed spears dangling from its face. Missing a good chunk out of the middle of its body, the slug couldn't hope to survive, but the sludge coating was so thick, or so magic resistant, that it managed to avoid being destroyed by the gravity bomb. Holy moly, that's new. Considering I can't burn them, or realistically get close enough to bite them, what the heck am I supposed to do? Fling bombs at every monster I see? And what about the rest of the colony? What are they going to do? This is going to be a major pain in the thorax, I can already tell. Chapter 11:22 Creatures Assault. This description is a thing. Occultus toxicus limax, hidden toxic slug. A hardy, defensive monster used as a forward scout by the Krath tribes. With its dense coating of ascended slime flesh, the hidden toxic slug is difficult to kill, and is capable of changing the environment to better suit itself and its masters. Actual useful information in the basic profile. Gandalf, you feeling alright? This is most unheard of. Of course, information only leads to more questions, but at least I know what direction the investigation is going to go. Who in the name of heck are the Krath? Was this monster a pet? Or did they raise these monsters in the depths somehow? As far as I know, that's not possible. You can't get monsters to cooperate unless they have sufficient intelligence or are born from a queen-type pet, like the aphids. Okay, actually there's several ways to get monsters to cooperate with you. I grab hold of the core and examine it. Thankfully, it wasn't chewed up by the gravity bomb. Interestingly, the monster seems pretty well designed, either by the dungeon or the Krath. Most of its evolutionary potential is bound up within its two main functions, the terraforming acid spray and its hyper-defensive slime coat. Looking at the details of it, outside of me sitting in its acid for a prolonged period of time, or stabbing me through the eyeball with the mouth spear, there wasn't much chance the thing would have been able to hurt me. If I'd been willing to get close enough, an empowered void chomp would likely do the trick in one shot. Still, the benefit of being born in the deeper strata of the dungeon is alive and well with these damn slugs. Just imagining a world in which every ant is born with a diamond carapace out of the gate, or other powerful alternate materials, makes me green with envy. Well, if these slugs think they can slide up here and take on the colony, they've got another thing coming. I take a bit of time to roast the heck out of the tunnel before me again, burning away the goop and slime, including boiling the slime pool to nothing. Hopefully it fills up with water again soon. Job done, I rush back to the troops waiting at the tunnel to report what I've seen. Creepy slug thing, hard to kill, someone take this core to the generals. The ants look vaguely confused as I unload my perfect and clear description upon them. Sure, eldest. We'll get someone to run that core to the command center straight away. I want a report of what's happening in the other tunnels as well. The monsters from the 5th are pushing up and it seems like they might be organized rather than random attacks. When I organize my thoughts I realize that this situation might be worse than I initially thought. Could this be a full-on assault by a civilization buried deep in the 5th? Or does this happen all the time? Damn it, I really wish I could talk to the Brathian again, although it might not be a good idea to reveal a weakness or lack of knowledge to them. There's nothing for it, I'm going to have to ask the tree. Hopefully, I can get the branchies to answer my questions so I don't have to talk to the mother tree herself. She's always difficult. You guys will have to take over the tunnel for a bit, I tell the soldier eventually. Of course, handover isn't quite that simple and it's 10 minutes before I can leave my post and make my way deeper into the nest. Before long, some runners come and give me a clear picture of what's going on around the place. The rising poison mana has been seen pretty much all over. Only a few tunnels, closer to the surface, are completely free from the taint, and slug monsters, along with poison frogs and other nasty things, have already been encountered. So far, the colony is trying to solve the problem with overwhelming firepower and numbers, which usually works pretty darn well for us. The monster I fought has only been fought in 2 other tunnels, luckily. Tiny was able to roast one with lightning, then finish it off with his devastating punches. The other was brought down by over 100 mages using earth and lava magic to trap and cook it, then stabbing through the coating with hardened spears of compressed rock. Perhaps we need our battle mages to start training in more advanced elements. If lightning works as well as it sounds, that could be the solution. I ponder the issue as I scuttle through the long tunnels as quickly as I can. There's only one long tunnel that the colony has committed to keeping open outside of the nest and it connects our mountain fortress to the territory claimed by the mother tree and her children. Thankfully, it's high up and relatively isolated, so there isn't too much trouble I have to punch through before I reach the garden-infested underground. Before too long, I run into a large Bruinchi keeper tending to the plants and smiting the monsters emerging from the walls. Thank goodness. Great to see you. How's things? Life good being a tree thing? I imagine it is. The large wooden creature turns to me slowly, blinking as it sees my giant form occupying space within its carefully tended garden. Greetings, six-legged one. The mother has told me of your arrival. Of course she did. I hope she's in a welcoming sort of mood. The plants around me writhe and shake, communicating her state of mind. Not really, the keeper informs me. Okay, I've just got a few quick questions, then I'm out of your vines. Is that all right? It's about the wave. The keeper seems to be listening to something, his head cocked to the side. You can ask, and hopefully I can answer you, he says finally. It's about the slugs, the craft, and the toxic mana from the 5th stratum. I've fought monsters from down there before, but I've never heard any mention of these craft. The big tree stands silent for a moment, then he nods. I am permitted to answer. The mother does not like those of whom you speak. The plants around me writhe violently again. Does she like anyone, though? Chapter 11:23 Slug Supremacy. Mother is beginning to recover the energy she spent in our defense, the keeper noted happily, running his long, root-like fingers across the nearby flowers. Biomass is accumulating steadily, but more importantly, her root network is bringing in vastly more mana now. That's great news, I suppose. Technically, the mother tree is an ally of ours, so if she's doing well, then that's great. If only she wasn't so petty, I wouldn't worry about her regaining her strength. At any moment, I expect a vine to creep out and trip me up, just so she can laugh at me. Lousy tree. All around us, the chamber is bursting with life, and sometimes I have to remind myself that everything I see is an extension of the one monster. This garden is a part of her body, created to harvest mana and biomass, then funnel it all back to her main body. I have to say, life is very different for a plant-type monster. Being able to spread herself out over multiple strata is pretty darn sweet. Is she raking in the experience as well? From what I understand, she's been this way for quite a while now. She must be getting close to her next evolution, right? The keeper shakes his head, a little sadly. Our mother does not intend to evolve any further. The ideal living conditions for us, her children, are here on the 4th. If she were to evolve, she would be forced deeper into the dungeon, and we would follow her. That's a little unexpected. I gather she spent a lot of her evolutionary potential to be capable of creating the Bruinchi, which means she's probably lacking a bit on the combat side of the equation. So she's deliberately leaving herself vulnerable. There's a chance she'll get attacked again. We are very concerned, but she will not listen to us. This is why we have been pushing to forge more alliances, like we did with the folk. Your colony arrived at the perfect time and we are very grateful to you. Our mother is less inclined. She generally doesn't trust monsters. I'm about to retort, but she's a monster. When I realize that's exactly the reason. She knows how motivated we are by biomass and experience. Luckily for her, the colony is so united and without rogue elements. I could easily imagine some monster scheming to take down the tree and convincing others to go along with the plan. The Krath, I steer the conversation back to what I need to know. All I know about them is that they're some kind of slug tribe in the 5th, and I only know that much because I got it from a basic profile. I fought a tough slug creature that they use as a forward scout or something. Are they invading, or is this normal behavior? Even in the wooden expression of a keeper, I can plainly see the distaste he has for these sluggos. The Krath are the dominant intelligent monster species in the 5th, he explains, and they are dreadful, horrible creatures. Cruel, conniving and insidious, they delight in the suffering of others. Their tribes are nomadic, constantly raiding and fighting each other, subjecting the captives to slow, painful deaths. During a wave, they will always try to extend their reach into the 4th. They are looking for captives that they can drag back and throw into their sludge pools. Gross. These slugs sound like a serious pain in the backside. Why are they trying to dunk people in pools of goop? They get a laugh out of it. Is the pool acid and it melts us? The tree shakes his head, real anger burning in his eyes. The pools are filled with an invasive and corrupting mana. Whatever is subjected to it will be twisted in mind and body, transformed into a loyal minion of the Krath. Even now, we fight the Krath below the roots of our mother, and Bruinchi have been taken many times in the past. We hunt them down and put them to rest, every time. I get the feeling that doing so comes at quite the cost. Mind-controlling, body-morphing sludge pools of doom. This is nasty stuff. What the heck is going on down in the fifth? The true horror of what I'm being told only strikes when I realize what might happen if they get a hold of one of us. One of the colony. Any ant could evolve into a queen if they really wanted to. If I wanted to add a full set of egg production organs in my next evolution, it would barely scratch my evolutionary energy. A high-tier ant, going from 5 to 6, or maybe even 4 to 5, could do the same. Would the craft be able to produce an entire slave race of corrupted ants from just a single captive? Nards, I mutter. Well, thanks for the tip. Could have told us this before, though, might have come in handy. You didn't ask, the keeper shrugs. We assumed you already knew. Fighting off the Krath is a common occurrence here in the fourth. It happens every wave, all over the dungeon. So basically every empire in the entire stratum is currently engaged in this activity. Good to know. Alright, tell your mother I said, hello. I'm glad to hear she's doing well. So saying, I rush back to the colony. This is something we are going to have to handle very, very carefully. Chapter 11:24 Slime Patrol. This is disturbing news, eldest. Sloane and Victor don't look pleased with what I have to say. Apparently, this is going on everywhere in the stratum right now, but as monsters, we are especially vulnerable. The two generals nod as they ponder this issue. The idea of having a hostile monster group raising a corrupted colony to fight against us is certainly not a welcome one. We will take every precaution to prevent someone from being taken, and implement checks to ensure we can act swiftly to recover any of our family who are, but... The two look very uncomfortable as Sloane lays this out. But what? I ask, impatient. It's impossible that we would be able to succeed forever. Even if we get through 2, 3, 10 waves without a single member of the colony being captured, they only have to succeed once. In the long term, defense is not a viable strategy. I can see what they mean. We can fend off the Krath here in the fourth 10,000 times, but they only have to succeed a single time, drag a captive away and throw them into the sludge. From there, it's only a hop, step and a jump to creating their own colony. We have to go on the offensive, I say the thought out loud, and the two generals agree solemnly. Eradication of the Krath is our only viable path forward. We must exterminate them from the dungeon completely. From what I understand, the fifth is a completely corrupted layer of the dungeon, hostile to life in an almost comically extreme way. It's going to be horrendous fighting down there, and without losing a single ant in the process. There's only one general who I think is going to be capable of making the hard decisions to run a campaign like that. It's going to take time for us to prep something like this, I tell the generals, so let's do our best in the meantime, but start planning now. One thing I want to establish at the outset, I think Solent should be the one in charge of the fight. It'll be unconventional, and our opponents are renowned for their slipperiness and cruelty. We need an unconventional general. I won't straight up tell them to use Solent, I'm not in charge of the colony and I don't want to be, but I definitely think they should give her strong consideration. I know the generals are reluctant to put their trust in the little general due to the odd way she thinks, but we're talking about the ant who was prepared to poison the eldest in order to win. To achieve victory in the fifth, that's exactly the attitude we need. I'm going to try and position myself centrally, I tell them. When there's a tough slug monster, send for me and I'll take care of it. That will help a great deal. Thank you, eldest. So saying, I find a spot out of the way and park myself down in the central chamber beneath the nest. I'm not exactly close to the front lines here, but at least I'm equally far from them. I reach out to my 3 companions to inform them of the situation. If you run into any dangerous beasts from the fifth, be especially careful when engaging with them. If you have trouble driving them back, call for me and I'll come help. Don't think that what we've seen so far is as bad as it's going to get. These filth are disgusting, Master, Chrysalis sniffs. They leave disgusting slime and putrid mana everywhere they go. I get the feeling they do their best to spread it as much as they can, makes it easier for them to fight. That's a good point actually. If you can safely burn off or otherwise destroy the terrain advantage, then make sure you do, but not at the expense of draining your resources too much. Got that, Tiny? What? The big ape grunts. Don't use all your lightning burning off slime and goop, alright. You'll struggle to fight against those monsters without it. Punch, Tiny, punch, he insists. I'm not underestimating your fists, big guy. I know you've got some firepower in those cannons, but if you get that close, you make yourself vulnerable to poison shenanigans. You have to be careful against these monsters, they don't fight fair. There's a brooding silence from the big ape before he replies. Okay, he grunts. We'll be careful, That's about as good as I'm going to get from him. You be careful too, Chrysalis. If you stick a tentacle into one of these creatures, they might poison you through it. I've already had to cut off several of my own limbs, Master. Okay, well, make sure you don't run out of shadow flesh, then. Nvidia, you should be fine if you just keep blowing everything up or melting it with your eye laser. The SSSSSEEE beast SSSSS. Too greedy. Yeah, I'm not a fan of them either, buddy. Give them the business for me. Yes, they shall SSSS be miney. A bit unusual for Nvidia to be making a moral judgment about the monsters he fights, but hey, the crafts suck, what can I say? How impressive, they even managed to get an envy demon to think they're terrible. Perhaps I should applaud. After making sure my precious comrades are aware of what's coming, I turn my attention to the vestibule and what it has to tell me. Naturally, I want to focus on the battles my siblings are undergoing against the 5th stratum monsters, but something else catches my eye and distracts me. Stupid guards. They're multiplying. Where before I had 2 stern golden statues taking up residence within the nave, now there are 4. 2 more people have picked up these strange classes, and I've got no doubt that they are part of that pilgrimage gone wrong. That damned priest, he's never going to stop causing me issues. If I could get him to shut his mouth for a week, I'd be satisfied. I don't have time to deal with it now. I've got other things to focus on. First off, let's see how Solent is going. Chapter 11:25 Unique Problems, Unique Solutions. Solent watched the battle unfold from amongst the very thick of it. Close enough to the front that her own mandibles had seen their fair share of action, she looked into the jaws of the enemy and directed the fighting from amongst the thick of it. Burn and slide, she ordered. Burn and slide, roared the troops around her. Instantly, powerful blue flames erupted, igniting the air in front of the line. Monsters cried out in the heat, but the flames continued. They had learned not to underestimate these creatures. For a further 10 seconds, the mages continued to burn the tunnel as the soldiers and scouts massed behind them with generals for support. At the same instant, every mage cut off their burst to reveal the tunnel ahead had become a searing wasteland, the rocks still smoldering as they glowed cherry red. For a single second, the ant force assessed the field ahead of them, then launched their slide maneuver. Soldiers dashed, forcing their bodies forward, building speed until the front rank lifted their legs completely off the ground, held aloft by the momentum of the ants locked behind them. The moment they cleared the searing stone, their feet touched the ground again and the soldiers behind lifted their feet. Across the walls and ceiling, the scouts and generals surged, mandibles gnashing. Solent had found that fire, while not sufficient to burn through the sturdy defenses these monsters coated themselves with, did slow them down. Burning away the outer layer of sludge and clearing the rock allowed the ants room to approach and attack with their natural weapons. An advancing wall of chitin and burning ant willpower, the leading soldiers dove forward, slamming into the slug monster and gripping tight with their jaws. Acid hissed and steam filled the air, but the soldiers endured. From the flanks, the ants came, latching on and cutting deep with their jaws. The slug pulsed, preparing to release an explosion of acid and slime, but it was too late. Solent was already in control. In one smooth motion, the soldiers, scouts and generals rotated around the tunnel like the hands of a human clock, flipping the monster onto its back. Far from the devastating barrage of goop, the creature unleashed the acid directly onto the stone floor of the cavern. With its belly exposed, the remaining ants dove on its weakness, jaws scissoring and tearing through the burning protective flesh until they found the true creature within. Ice and fire, 2 kilometers, Solent ordered, retreat and triage. I want it completed in 5 minutes this time. The ants didn't salute. Solent considered it a waste of precious seconds, instead they simply leapt to their task. The mages, accompanied by their dedicated support troops, rushed to the front and began to work their elemental magic to push back the corrupted mana. Freezing followed by burning had proven to be far more effective than pure flame when purging the sludge the monsters of the 5th left behind, but such rapid cooling and heating of the rock was dangerous. Since it wasn't in the colony's best interest to destabilize the tunnels, they had to use this technique judiciously. After all, if they collapsed and closed off the nest, that would stop all the experience, cores and biomass from wandering up to them. Thousands of ants rushed in many directions, yet there was no chaos. It was almost a dance, as ants filed into neat lines with perfect synchronization, flowing between each other with effortless timing. The more time she spent with them and the more time they drilled, the smoother each and every movement became. Solent felt true joy spark in her carapace as she watched the flawless execution of their drills. Truly, it was on the training ground that wars were won. Using their mandibles to dissect and defeat the slug foes had proven to be the fastest and most effective method, yet it wasn't without cost. Stoic and determined, the soldiers and scouts who had closed with the beast marched back to safety, despite the heavy burn wounds they suffered. As they passed, each was blasted with water magic to cleanse them of the offending slime and doused in healing fluid to kickstart the mending process. With proper treatment, they would be back on the front lines in only a few hours, but having to rotate so many members of the army was putting a great deal of extra strain on Solent's troops. A more permanent solution was needed. She needed a tactic, method, or tool that more specifically countered these sludge monsters, something more efficient and targeted. Fortunately, the eldest, in their wisdom, had the foresight to ensure the colony would always have a method to conjure solutions at a time like this. Solent had spent a great deal of time working with the core shapers lately. There were many things they could be used for in specific niche roles, something the ants weren't always suited to do. Now here was a monster that was difficult for them to defeat, but that didn't mean they couldn't create something that worked. When she rotated off the front line at the end of her shift, Solent bid her troops to continue their drills under the guidance of her broodmates before she set off to speak with the experts. Ellie and Bella were present in the fortress, having arrived through the gate not that long ago. Solent felt it was time to take her concerns to the two of them directly. Surprisingly, she found the two council members resting, without anyone demanding their time. When she entered, the two of them sprang up, delighted to have a general enter their chambers. "Come in, how nice to see you," Ellie greeted her. "Please, try some tea," Bella encouraged as she guided Solent to a seat. "That is, very kind," the little general said as she accepted their hospitality. It took a little time, but eventually she was able to convince the two she didn't want cake, or biscuits, and get down to business. "I believe that the core shapers are the key to solving our current crisis, and will be of critical importance if the colony is to make any headway moving into the fifth stratum," Solent said. "The monsters we currently face are difficult for us to fight directly, and we are yet to see the true might of the fifth, so it will only get worse. We need solutions that only you can provide, dedicated pets that will counter these monsters directly." The two council members looked at her soberly for a long time before they collapsed into each other, sobbing as they used their forelegs and antennae to embrace. "At last, our time has come, sister. The core shapers will rise, at last." Chapter 11:26 Sick of the slime. The Krath. What can be said of the vicious nightmare creatures of the fifth that hasn't been said already? The earliest records are confused, so close to the rending, much was lost in the frantic expansion down into the dungeon. The Empire of Stone and the Chow were amongst the first to settle at this depth, but progression stalled like it had run into a brick wall. The fifth was incompatible with life in almost every conceivable way, even the air was poisonous to breathe. The Chow were the first to solidify their position in the fourth, and perhaps greed took hold of them as they made a strong push to extend their empire ever deeper. Harnessing the immense strength of their empire, they invaded the fifth, only to fail. They met the Krath, and within 20 years, the Chow had fallen to ruins, even their holdings within the fourth were lost. According to scholars, the Chow are the only one of the old races to be exterminated from Pangara. With this example, none have been willing to follow in their footsteps. Instead, they content themselves with their holdings in the fourth, only making slight incursions below and fighting off the slime whenever it tries to rise. ? Excerpt from The Wall That Lies Below, Fear of the Fifth, by Kaylor. Ah, how wonderful, tedium of an all-new kind. Before, I'd planted myself in one tunnel and fought off the monsters who came my way. It was repetitive and dull, as much as fighting against giant monsters can get dull, I suppose, but now I have an all-new problem. The stupid slugs just won't stop coming. My days have devolved into sprinting from tunnel to tunnel and savagely annihilating whatever monstrosity I find there using a no-holds-barred combination of void chomps and gravity bombs. After I burn back the sludge and toxic mana, I return to the central chamber, only to be called out again 10 minutes later. And so on, and so on. Of course, the colony is getting better at fighting against these horrible monsters, but taking them down without significant injuries is difficult for anyone without overwhelming firepower. Vibrant can get the job done, but her followers can't. Leroy has been desperate to sortie against them with her brain-dead brigade, but the generals won't let them. As heavy and cumbersome as they are, those idiots will just get bogged down in the slime and be unable to extract themselves. Which is exactly why they want to go, obviously. I sense the next encroachment coming through the vestibule even before a runner reaches me, the ant's determination to fight and win flowing into me and signaling the danger. I lift myself and get to running, speeding my huge frame through the tunnels toward the fight. Eldest, there's another incursion in Tunnel B3. I'm already on the way, can't you see that? Look at me, I'm running. Better than resting. Is it, though? I've been getting more than my fair share of sass from the ants seeing me resting in the central chamber. Sheesh, can't an eldest get 5 minutes to take a load of their legs without some smart ant poking their nose in? Apparently not. I keep a couple of minds sifting through the vestibule and I can tell that this battle is a little more serious than the previous ones. Multiple monsters from the 5th are pushing hard while the ants are doing their best to perform a delaying action, keeping damage down and holding off the slime as it creeps toward the nest. When I arrive, the tunnel is already a steaming mess of green goop. Through the acrid, stinking steam, I can see the bulbous form of some monster filling the air with noxious gas and launching great waves of sludge towards the colony's entrenched position. Pull back and fortify, I tell the army of ants. I'll take responsibility for this mess. Understood, eldest. First thing is first. I gather up my mana, concentrating hard and pushing my brains to their limits before I fire off an unenhanced gravity bomb. With careful aim, I shoot for the maximum distance, and the dreadful ball of doom screams down the tunnel through the steam. Hoo-ool, chew on that, you lousy sludge-faced boogers. With the bomb covering for me, I unleash the dragon breath, burning away the offending mana and slime, advancing behind the jet of absurdly hot flames as they scorch the rock clean. If I've learned one thing fighting against these monsters, it's that you can't rush things. They're so toxic, so poisonous, that if they manage to infect you, it'll take hours for the healers to purge the offending mana. Not to mention, the amount of energy required to cleanse the infection is 10 times the amount that went into it. It's like they're trying to wage a war of attrition against our healers. Obviously, I can heal myself, so it isn't a drain on the colony, but it's a serious pain in the thorax for me. And it stings like heck. No, far better to push them back, take away the terrain advantage before tearing them apart with overwhelming force. I'll work my way closer, use an empowered void chomp, and that'll be the end of it. Keeping my distance as the gravity bomb works itself out, I thoroughly cleanse the tunnel, and when the dark sphere of slowly rotating doom fades, I dash forward into the gap, ready to take on all comers. Of course, what I find there is far from what I expected. The walls, the ceiling, everything is positively dripping with noxious goo, thick strands of mucus-like slime connecting the floor to the roof. In the middle of it all, the bulbous form of the monster I saw before expands before me, puffing up like a blowfish before it pumps out a thick cloud of vile, yellow-green gas. Heck, no, even worse, I can see dozens, maybe hundreds of little slugs rushing towards me through the slime, their heads ending in what appear to be sharp, drill-like teeth. There ain't no way. Burn it all to DEAAAAAATH. Gravity bomb. HOOOOOOOOOWWWWWLLLLLLLLLLLLLLLLLLL. Chapter 1127 Kill it with fire. Ah, the empowered gravity bomb, infused with the overflowing will of the colony via my trusty altar. Would there ever be a time I didn't threaten my own life when using this stupid ability? The bomb rips through the air, sucking in everything around it, creating a horrendous wind as the air races to fill in the void. My antennae flap wildly as I realize just what I've done and scramble to get my precious diamond carapace to safety. 6 legs scramble, scratching and scrabbling at the dirt as I struggle to turn myself around. I fired the damn thing pretty much point blank, and I barely get my hands pointed in the right direction when the spell detonates. On the very edge of my peripheral vision, I see the bomb expand right behind me. Even a weak gravity bomb, when empowered by the altar, can pack a serious punch, and sadly, this one is no different. I flex my legs, my core thrashing with wild energy as I explode forward with an empowered dash. Of course, there's not enough room and I run face first into the wall. Damn it, can't these tunnels be a little bit straighter? My face explodes with pain as the impact rattles through my carapace and shakes up my insides, but thankfully no major damage is suffered. My mandibles are stuck about half a meter deep into the rock, though, which is less than ideal. HOOOOOOOOWWWWLLLLLLL. The spell screams behind me, and I think I get a notification, but I can't even hear someone talking in my mind through the din. Besides that, my mind is preoccupied with not being sucked into the swirling void of doom, which is important. Come on, come on, come on. Break, you lousy rock. I try to yank my head free, only to find that my legs are no longer on the ground. As the ridiculous force of the pull exerts itself on me, my entire body has risen up off the ground. I'm dangling in midair, with only my mandibles buried in the stone to keep me from falling horizontally to my death. Come on, stone, hold. Hold, you lousy rock. My minds spin, pumping out earth mana which I compress before using it to harden the stone around my trusty pinchers. If that stuff breaks, or even worse, comes loose from the wall, I'm toast. I pull up every drop of mana in my core and shove it through the omni-elemental construct, getting sweet stone mana out the other end, which I promptly pour out until I'm buried up to the eyeballs in the stuff. It's terrifying, but I eventually reach an equilibrium, with my body held aloft, being pulled back into the danger zone, but the stone resolutely holding strong. When the spell finally fades, my body falls to the ground and I go completely limp with relief. Holy moly, I've never been that close to the epicenter of a gravity bomb before, and I hope I never am again. That was terrifying. My legs feel like jelly, in fact I've got the shivers over my entire body. I'm almost glad I couldn't see directly behind me, peering straight into the void might have been too much for my poor ant heart. And now I need to get my face free. A void chomp manages to do the job, exploding the rock in front of me and showering me with dust and stone chips, several of which poke into my eyes. These soft orbs remain the greatest weakness of my body. I'm going to have to deal with that issue when I next evolve. For now, I revel in my freedom and survival. Yes, cheating death once again, Anthony. You might have had me once, but never twice. Take that. Ouch. A slight pain runs up my leg and I glance down to see what's going on, only to find one of those horrific drill worms has latched onto my right rear leg. In fact, it hasn't just latched on, it's trying to tunnel its way into my leg. Kill it with fire. Gravity bow. Now hold it a second, execute plan B. Dragon's breath. From between my mandibles launches a roaring jet of flame which I resolutely turn on my own leg, searing the little pest in an instant, while also roasting myself in the process. How in the name of heck did that damn thing survive? Those slugs are nightmare fuel, I swear to Gandalf, the sight of them is absolutely terrifying. I trigger the regeneration gland to hopefully repair my leg a little faster before I adjust my position and send the searing jet of flame down the tunnel. If any more of those things lived through the bomb, then I want them fully roasted. Only when the rocks are searing hot and every inch of the remaining goop I can see has evaporated do I dare to start to crawl forward into the wreckage of what the gravity bomb has wrought. Not even the stone survived intact. The area is distinctly more spherical than it was before, and right in the middle is a glowing, compressing chunk of stuff that fell when the bomb ended. As for signs of the monster, surprisingly, there are some. The creature was a little lucky in that I didn't fire the bomb directly towards it, but in front of it, aimed at the little tunnel slugs. Whatever these things used to grip, be they a foot, like a mollusk uses or some other method, it managed to hold on pretty well, but not quite well enough. Around half of the monster has been blitzed, the rest is a now roasted and steaming mess on the ground. Sigh, better get a bite of it so I can check the profile. Eating these things is just as unappealing as fighting them. Chapter 11:28 Undelicious. I swear I lose HP when I bite into the thing. I take damage. That's how toxic these creatures are. I defeat it using the power of a collapsed star and then roast the biomass with the concentrated heat of a dragon's breath, and still, it's so poisonous my mouth stings with pain when I consume it. I'm really starting to hate the monsters from the fifth. Really hate them. Everyone was all like, oh, the demons from the third are the worst, what with all the maiming and killing and obsessive behaviors. Absolutely nonsense. The demons were and are great. Al is an absolute legend compared to these horrible things. Fortunately, a single mouthful is enough to unlock the basic profile, and a single mouthful is all I'm going to take. Examine Dater. Swarm Host B. A deadly branch of the sludge elemental, this creature uses noxious, acidic gas to defend itself, along with its poisonous slime. However, the true threat is the plague drones it nurses within its flesh. These mindless parasites are extremely difficult to remove and will excrete potent toxins directly into the body of their unfortunate victims. Even Gandalf thinks these monsters are too much, what the heck. Swarm Host, to say I'm not a fan is an absurd understatement. Yet another monstrosity I need to report back to the colony about so we can avoid having to lop off segments of ant soldiers to remove these horrendous things. I'm not going to lie to you, I'd almost rather monsters from the 6th came up here and started punching us in the face than deal with this nonsense. Invasive toxin drones, have mercy on me. As I trudge back to the nest, I inform my comrades about the monster. Tiny strikes me as particularly vulnerable to this type of creature. If one gets onto him before he can burn it off with lightning, he might be in trouble. Only after I natter at him like a worried mother hen does he eventually and begrudgingly agree to be careful. Chrysalis is absolutely scandalized that such monsters exist and that one bit me, then she swears to extract terrible vengeance upon the next one she sees. As long as I don't see what happens, then I don't mind. I get the feeling I would have nightmares. Nvidia is strangely silent when I tell him about it, and it takes me a little while to realize what's going on in his mind. No, you can't evolve to be a drone host. I want SSSS, the little SSSSSSS. Sorry, I'm putting 3 legs down on this one, it's too gross. There's tons of stuff you want, literally everything, so there was no way it was going to happen in the first place. You need to start making a list of all the things you want in order of priority, because you only get the top 5. The little dude is going to struggle when he evolves, that's for sure. Putting menu after menu of options he can't have in front of him is going to be tortuous. These monsters sound disturbing, eldest. They very much are, I assure Sloane back in the central chamber. Be extra careful around them, don't get too close. I also suspect that they may release a final wave of drones when they're finished off, which is another thing to watch for. Horrible things. She cleans her antennae, dragging them through her elbow joints to soothe herself. The 5th stratum only gets more and more difficult for us to manage, she says. We are going to have to shift our approach to almost everything against these creatures. Adapt and survive, I tell the general. New enemies means new methods. I suspect that's only going to get more true the deeper into the dungeon we get. Monsters will get more powerful and more specialized. We'll have to adjust on the fly to counter their strengths and exploit their weaknesses. I leave the general musing and go back to my post, waiting for word of the next intrusion that I need to get up and deal with. And then, this becomes my routine for the next week. Increasingly, the tunnels below the nest become filled with goop, slime and deadly monsters from the 5th, and I sally forth, with flame and gravity to annihilate them with extreme force, only to return and rest while I can. The more time passes, the more the colony is required to engage in aggressive countermeasures against the encroaching filth. Burning off the tunnels isn't enough, even using multiple elements doesn't cut it. The invading mana is so infectious, even a smidgen left behind will eventually multiply and begin to spread again. Mages are called in to sweep and decontaminate, purging every speck of poison without remorse. My family are required to perform regular aggressive actions, pushing out from the fortress to drive back the terraforming efforts of the slugs and their virus-like energy. Alongside the ever-increasing numbers of advanced monsters we see, things are starting to get pinched by the time the week is up. So many ants are rotating through the hospital system that it's been stretched to breaking point once again. Anyone with only minor acid burns and injuries is being sent back to their resting chambers and told to sleep it off at this point. Surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly, the tunnel having the most success at handling its own business without my intervention is Solence. The little general has proven herself to be exceptionally capable at adapting to the situation and continues to hone her brutal level of efficiency down to the wire. Sloane and Victor don't want to admit it, but I can tell they're impressed by the new colony champion. Her methods are unorthodox, by the colony's standards, but she rates extremely highly on the most important metric of all, results. Chapter 1129, The Little General. We aim to advance in 10 minutes. Make sure your squads are ready. They had spent a week preparing for this expedition, training, theorizing, testing. Bella and Ellie had worked overtime, stretching their knowledge of monster anatomy to the very limits, studying the cores of 5th stratum monsters with intense focus. Solence's broodmates acknowledged her instructions and rushed off to carry out her word, only Leonidant remaining behind. How confident are you? The scout asked. That's an unusually direct question. These are unusual times. Very true words. Solent reflected for a moment. We really have come a long way, haven't we? She said, cleaning her antennae carefully. It wasn't that long ago the only thing we had to worry about was tunnel ball and completing our training exercises. The eldest certainly changed that in a hurry. The giant ant had thrown Solent and her broodmates into the thick of the conflict at the earliest possible opportunity. It had been a brutal learning curve, for all of them, but they had grown so fast as a result of the change, it was difficult to view it as a bad thing. I believe the eldest was wise to place us here, Solent decided. It's been an excellent opportunity to develop ourselves and be of use to the family. That doesn't answer my question. How confident are you? Solent considered the question for a moment. About half, she said finally. It's lower than I would like, but we need to start testing our ideas sooner rather than later. More certainty will be hard to come by without taking a few risks now. We trust you, the scout reassured her general. I'm sure we're going to be successful. Of course, Solent nodded, we can't lose. With a quick salute, Leonidant rushed off to join the others organizing the column. Solent left them to it. She needed to focus on the bigger picture, not spend her time fussing over the minor details before they set out. No matter how much she wanted to. The more she tried to look over their thorax and check their work, the more her broodmates pushed back and told her to find something productive to do. The little general completely believed in their capabilities, but it was hard to let go sometimes. You really are heading out? Solent turned to see Ellie and Bella, the two Core Shaper Council members, approaching from the nest. Each looked visibly worried, antennae twitching and legs flexing anxiously. We need to know sooner rather than later if we are on the right track, Solent said. I believe in the work that you and your cast members have completed to this point. Without proper assessment, we won't be able to advance according to the timetable I have laid out. Timetable? Ellie asked. I thought we were working on solutions for the toxic mana and miasma for the wave. Defense. We are, Solent assured her, eyes focusing down the tunnel, but somehow looking far beyond. For now, that is what we are doing. Leonidant signaled from her place in the column and Solent turned to the two Core Shapers. I have to excuse myself, it's time to depart. I'll give you a full report the moment we return. Work hard, Bella said. I hope the pets will do us all proud. I'm sure they will. So saying, the little general left the two behind and took her place amongst the column as it slowly began to move, picking up the pace as the thousands of ants slotted into line. A constant stream of scouts ran forward and back, alerting Solent and the other generals as to the situation further down the tunnel. It was grim, as expected. Solent had planned to move 10 kilometers beyond the defensive line held by the colony, moving out and down, closer to the 5th, but as reports rolled in, it seemed they would hardly need to travel at all to find what they were looking for. Barely 10% of the way into their journey, the column ground to a halt. Assume standing formation 5, but tell the Earth mages not to stretch themselves. If things go according to plan, we won't be here long, Solent instructed, and the runners raced to deliver her orders. She moved toward the front of the long line of ants, running a keen eye along the troops as she passed. Was it a trick of the light, or did they straighten when they came under her gaze? It's even worse than we predicted, someone said, indicating forward with one antenna. She wasn't wrong. The colony regularly burned outward from the defensive line, but the distance had grown shorter and shorter as the wave went on. Now, barely a single kilometer from where they'd started, Solent was confronted with the full scope of what they were up against. The slime was everywhere. Thick pools of mucus covered the floor of the tunnel, fibrous strands stretched every which way, forming a spider web of goop. It dripped from the ceiling, slid down the walls. Even the air was contaminated, dense with poisonous, acidic gases that made it difficult to see. At this density, the toxic mana of the 5th was basically self-sustaining. The slime produced more of itself, spreading, pooling, growing thicker and more noxious by the hour. If nothing was done, it would creep all the way to the nest and then up through the fortress until it spilled out into the waters that surrounded the mountain. At that point, it would become someone else's problem, the Brathian most likely, who would be forced to clean up and eradicate the mess lest another stratum fall as the 5th had fallen. It wouldn't come to that, of course. Any monster sightings? None, thankfully. Then we can deploy. Already. Solent gestured forwards. Are you offering to walk deeper, Summit? I'm not. Deploy the first wave. Solent gave the command and in moments, the first wave of Core Shapers assigned to this expeditionary force were by her side, eager to prove their worth. The pets, promisingly, looked hungry. Bella and Ellie, along with their available cast members, had worked furiously, iterating dozens of times to come up with their current working design. A cross between a type of jellyfish the colony had found in the lake and a caterpillar-like grub that feasted on the oversized vegetation that covered the mountainsides of the 4th, they were a weird-looking monster. Mostly transparent, the monsters were fairly large, bigger than all but the largest soldiers. They humped and wiggled along the ground in ungainly fashion at the urging of their Core Shaper masters. Solent watched intently as a dozen of them first encountered the toxic sludge the colony was struggling to deal with. They leapt at it, hurling themselves into the thickest pools of mucus and sludge, wobbling happily as they settled themselves into it. Almost immediately, their soft blue jelly-like bodies became tainted as the corrupting mana invaded them. The monsters welcomed it, soaking up the slime until they became a muddy, lurid green from top to bottom. Solent wasn't sure if the monsters were successful, or on the verge of breaking down, but the core shapers watched, unmoved, and so she did too. It took time, almost 5 minutes, before the first signs of progress were seen. A faint tint of blue returned, right in the center of the creature's mass. The color spread across the top half of the monsters until they were divided into a noxious green lower half and a wholesome, shining blue top. Then the creatures revealed their faces, wide, cheerful eyes emerging from their jelly forms, along with a number of chubby tendrils that served as their mouths. The appendages were extended, and from the tips, they began to release a steady stream of bright blue gas. Woof, 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 woof. The new pets seemed to chortle happily as they began to move slowly around the tunnel, soaking up the corruption and releasing their sweet, purified mana into the air in a constant flow. Seems like a success, Solent commented, her head already swirling with possibilities. The invasion of the fifth might just be possible after all. Chapter 11:30 Terraforming. It turned out, monsters from the fifth didn't much like it when you took their slime away. An hour after first deploying the woofers, as the ants had begun to call them, much to the annoyance of the core shapers, they saw for the first time how the slugs would react when they saw someone messing with their precious goop. How could Solent describe it? They went absolutely, 100%, without exception, gonzo crazy. A fat toad monster hopped around the corner and saw the woofers happily huffing and puffing, soaking up the slime and purifying it, and grew still. Naturally, the ants had sprung into action, recovering the slow-moving pets and taking up a defensive formation. What they didn't expect was for the frog to unleash a mighty croak, the explosive exhalation filled with mindless rage, before it hurled itself headlong toward the massed ant position. Such was its anger, the monster fought completely heedless of its own survival, throwing itself recklessly into the jaws of the soldiers, trying to crush them with its mass whilst it lashed out with powerful legs, lashing tongue and toxic bile. Many were wounded, despite the fight being thousands against one, and Solent was not pleased. In the midst of reprimanding her soldiers for their slow reaction, and blaming herself for not foreseeing the situation, she sensed something might be a little off, and stared hard into the haze-filled depths before them. "Let's pull back and fortify," she ordered crisply. "I want Tunnel Fort 3-2 constructed in 5 minutes. That build is allotted 7 minutes, her lead carver and fellow broodmate, Subutant, stated. "We don't have 7, Solent replied shortly, and the carver dashed away, issuing a flurry of instructions to her fellow builders. "What do you see?" Summant asked, bracing in the front line along with the other soldiers as they began an ordered, step-by-step retreat toward the mountain fortifications. "That frog would have been heard for kilometers through these tunnels," Solent replied, watching the haze intently. "You think it was calling for reinforcements? It didn't seem that intelligent." "I don't think it was calling for them, but I think they'll come anyway." In just a few minutes, the basic outline of the tunnel fort was complete. Sturdy walls, narrow opening, firing lines for spells and acid, along with channels for pulling back the wounded, had all been formed. Just in time, the ants had barely taken their positions when the haze seemed to thicken, imperceptibly at first, then in a rush, growing so dense that Solent could barely see 10 meters in front of her. "We need woofer mist," she ordered, and the core shapers grudgingly responded, the pets raising their tendrils and happily woofing as they unleashed the sparkling blue vapor. It was enough to prevent the miasma from flowing through the gap, but didn't break through the haze that filled the tunnel in front of them. As it turns out, it didn't have to. Every ant tensed as they heard the first roar, then the second, the third, and more, and more. Squelching, wet gurgles of rage bounced off the slime-coated tunnel walls to reach them as Solent lost count of the different monster calls. There were dozens of them. "Ice and fire the tunnel, 1 minute. Quick," she snapped. Mages dashed forward. The tunnel ahead was swept with an intense blizzard as 50 ice mages coordinated to drop the temperature well below freezing, pelting every surface with a barrage of frozen water. 30 seconds later, they pulled back and the fire mages stepped forward, igniting the air itself in a furious blast. Rock groaned and cracked at the rapid temperature shift and the sludge sizzled. The monsters screamed even louder, and much, much closer. "Brace!" Solent roared as the fire mages cut off the blaze at the last second and scuttled backward, huge soldiers rushing forward to take their place. The wall of chitin was 4 soldiers deep when the first slug arrived, screeching, its circular maw wide open and a tongue of razor-sharp barbs projecting wildly forward. Prepared for the injuries, the soldiers lunged and chomped, their mandibles sizzling as they bit into the toxic flesh. Heedless of the wounds, the slug pushed forward, discharging a burst of slime from the pores on its back. A flood of water from the mages cleaned out much of the goop, but it was stubborn and more than one soldier battled on with a sizzling, clinging patch of goop on their back. The core shapers stepped up and their pets came alongside them. Opening their mouths wide, the woofers shot forth blasts of pure gel that clung to the ooze whenever they came into contact, acting to counteract and neutralize the sludge. The slug died, still burbling in fury, and the soldiers hastily pulled the biomass into the temporary fort. The woofers descended on it with apparent joy, settling atop the remains of the creature and absorbing it. Woof, woof, woof. They chortled. Then came another slug, and another, then a toxin elemental, then a toad, then more, and more and more. When it finally finished, Solent's force had been battered, bruised and almost broken a dozen times. The list of injured ants was far too long, and more than 100 had fallen in the furious fighting. The price they had paid for the pitiful progress that had been achieved made her want to chalk up the battle as a loss, but in her heart, she knew it had been worth it. Piles of 5th stratum biomass, dozens of cores and the lessons learned were a rich reward indeed, not to mention what they had learned about their new weapons against the sludge. Without the purifying mist and gel, it would have been 10 times as difficult to hold off the assault. The sludge monsters had willingly thrown their lives away to try and coat the ants with slime and acid, to fill the position with corrupting miasma. Without the woofers counteracting the poisonous mana, the ants would have been fighting abdomen deep in sludge, a battle they were sure to lose. Even more promising, the transparent jelly caterpillars were only tier 3. The next time Solent returned, she was determined they would be tier 6. Prepare the retreat, she ordered. I want the most wounded to be returning under escort in the next 2 minutes. Everyone who is healthy will remain here and form the defensive line as we pull back. She turned to the core shapers. You did extremely well, and your pets have proven invaluable. This expedition has been a resounding success. Retreat immediately with your charges, I do not want to risk them in the slightest. As the core shapers moved away with their strange pets wiggling and humping along beside them, Leonidant, Subutant and Summon gathered around their general. What do you think just happened, General? The carver wondered. We've never seen behavior like that from the 5th monsters. I have never been in a fight that intense, Summon admitted. We were an antenna's breadth away from being overrun at the front. Solent considered for a while. We aren't the first to think of cleansing the toxic mana of the 5th, she said, yet nobody else seems to do it, that we know of, at least. Why do you think that is? Because the slugs go completely nuts whenever you try it. Leonidant muttered. Solent nodded. I think so. What we just experienced is but a taste of what awaits us in the 5th. The second we attempt to cleanse a single centimeter of corruption, every monster in a wide radius will rush at us in that same murderous rage. Summon shuddered. That's terrible. It's predictable, Solent corrected, clacking her mandibles thoughtfully, and predictable is always to our advantage.